the front row. Me too.
Okay. Good evening. Why don't we see some more people? I'm sure will be wandering in, but we'll get the evening started. My name is Bernie Lynch, and I'm joined by John Petrin and Sharon Flaherty. We're with Community Paradigm Associates. We were selected by the Select Board, the Selectmen, to assist the town in the search for a new town administrator. And as part of our normal process, we go out into the community and try to get as much information as we can about the town and about the issues that are facing the town, what the attributes are that people are looking for from the new town administrator. And one of the ideas that we always talk to our clients, the selectmen, about is, would you like to have some citizen participation in that process? And your Board of Selectmen here in the town of East Bridgewater, who are all here tonight, we're very quick to say yes. We want that as part of the process. We want the citizens and the community involved in the process to let us know what they're thinking about the town and which direction we should be looking as we conduct this search. So we're happy to have all of you here tonight. We're happy to be live on TV for the people at home watching this, so that they can hear the same things that you're going to be saying, and then passing that information on to us one way or another, so that we know from them as well what their thoughts are. Essentially, what we're very simply put, we're looking for information from you tonight about what makes East Bridgewater such an attractive place to live, to work, so that we can pass that on to the candidates that we're talking to, so that they know what a special place that East Bridgewater is. We also want to know what the challenges and opportunities are facing the town of East Bridgewater. What are the issues that you think the next town administrator needs to be focused on and needs to be able to work on to continue the progress that's been made here in the town of East Bridgewater and continues to move forward. And what are the attributes? What are the skills? What are the qualities that you're looking for from the next town administrator? Again, so that they fit into the town and fit into the town organization. So I'm going to open it up to you. We're really here to listen to you. We're happy to answer questions about the process. Maybe I'll stop there actually and tell you a little bit about the process. What we'll do after tonight is we're putting together a document that will be presented to candidates. We're going to be advertising the position in the next few days. We're going to start we've already begun our active recruiting process of getting people to apply for this position. And in the course of the next month, we'll collect all of those resumes, meet with a screening committee that will be established by the Board of Selectmen, and then start to winnow that down to ultimately getting to 3 finalists that we'll bring to the board probably sometime in July, with the hope being that a selection can be made and we can have someone on board here sometime in early September, I think is the time frame we're looking at. So, one more thing. We did not coordinate the jackets we were wearing tonight. This is not the Community Paradigm uniform. We don't yet have uniforms, but it's something to think about. So, in any event, who wants to go first? Tell me what your thoughts are. Gentleman in the back.
Hi, my name is Arthur Lizzie. So if you're already recruiting people, does that mean that you have a job description? And if you do, can you share that with us? And if it's ready to go in 3 days?
Yeah, what we have is the position profile that we're putting together. If you go to our website, www.communityparadigm.com, you can see the types of what a profile looks like. That there is not yet one for East Bridgewater, but it will lay out the qualities and characteristics that we're looking for, and tell you a little bit about the town. We're working off of the legal documents here in the town with regards to the specific responsibilities, and But again, that will be up in the next few days. When I say we're actually already doing recruiting, we're just talking to people to let them know that the position is available and will be posted in the next week, so that they should watch for that profile. Okay. Other comments? Sir?
Sure. Tim Kramer. Wondered if you could maybe give a description between a town manager and a town administrator.
Sure. You can watch John and I start to compete against one another here in giving that. Traditionally, a town manager has more authority than a town administrator. Generally, a town manager is established by charter, whether that be a special act charter that is begun at the local level and brought up to the state legislature, or is created through a home rule charter that has a charter commission that's elected locally and then has a certain finite amount of time to do its work and then put a charter before the voters. That's been the traditional difference between a town manager and a town administrator, just more authority. However, over time, as communities have adopted charters or local bylaws, they have placed with town administrators certain authorities and powers and responsibilities that in many communities are very similar to a town manager. For example, we did a search just last summer, and I remember there being a surprise. It was a town manager position in another community, and one of the candidates had been a town administrator in a very small community, but had substantial appointment authority, appointed every position within the town. That generally runs with a town manager, not with a town administrator. In that particular town that we were filling, the town manager did not have that type of authority and responsibility. So it really varies from town to town in the way that it's established. My background, and maybe I should have said this at the beginning, my background was I was hired by the town of Chelmsford, Massachusetts, as their executive secretary, which is very similar. I think East Bridgewater had one just up until the 1990s, thereabouts. They then changed the form of government and created a town manager position. I applied. I was fortunate enough to receive that position. And I did that for about 20 years. And then I became the city manager for the city of Lowell. I did that for about 8 years. John's background, I can let John talk about. Actually, John's got a good, probably answer this a little bit more directly because he's been a town administrator in a number of different towns and can probably speak to some of those differences.
So I've been 40 years in the business. I just retired as a town administrator for town of Burlington. So but I had appointment authority. So there's 3 areas you kind of look at. One is the appointment authority. Who's appointing the employees who have the higher and discipline capacity there. The second is the budget process. You know, who's really controlling the process of putting it together? And, you know, that piece. And then the third is the coordination with all the departments. So in a town administrator format, you have typically more departments that are independent and they don't necessarily come through the town manager. Now, I've been both town manager and a town administrator. When I was a town manager, everybody came through. I appointed all the departments, library, planning board, right across the board. In Burlington, which is a pretty big operation, so I had 350 employees in the general government side, $150 million budget. I did not appoint, planning board. I did not appoint the library and other areas, but I did appoint police, fire, public works. So that's really it. In a nutshell, they actually operate the same way. So I'm not so sure there's a huge difference in Massachusetts between a town administrator and a town manager. That's the person who gets blamed in the end for whatever is going to occur. And so it's the responsibility of that person to communicate. We're still New England, we're still Massachusetts, We love our independence, within areas, whether it's there or not. And so we have to learn to communicate, and that's the big, that's the big difference. But I think over the last 30 years in this state, it's kind of blurred, that difference between town administrator and town manager has kind of blurred over that 30 years. And it's almost, pretty much the same across a lot of municipalities. So what you got to hire, is a person who understands the way we do things, in each of the particular towns, but in the New England tradition as well.
Let me start with the, and I will tell you that this is as I said, it's being broadcast live, but it's also, I'm sure will be available to people that want to tune in and watch it at a later time. And so there will be candidates that will be watching this. I was on the phone today with a candidate that was watching another town that we're currently working with, and so he was quick to ask me questions about what he heard. So that's a warning, but it also gives you an opportunity to tell the candidates as you're sitting here what makes East Bridgewater so special. Why would they be interested in coming to work here? So maybe I'll start with that.
Everybody takes pride in their own town.
Right.
So why do you take pride in East Bridgewater? Let's start with those pieces. Anybody?
Here you go. Oh, that was like it was like a tie.
Same group.
Yeah.
The history of this town is very unique, very important. And,
Okay.
well worth preserving, and
Mm-hmm.
in some cases, it has been kind of set on the back burner for quite a number of years, but the
Okay.
further we go into it, the more important it is to, keep our history of this town alive,
The history and the character.
and the character, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm Kathy Wolf. I've only lived here 28 years,
Oh.
but I like the fact that it's easy to meet people and get involved in the various organizations in the community. We have activities going on many nights of the week at the library. We have a very busy senior slash, senior community center. We have, Kiwanis clubs, we have scouting, we have athletics for the kids. We have wonderful school systems, and the school class sizes are small enough, and the overall grades are small enough that you get to know the different kids in your class. I grew up in Lexington. When I graduated, we had over 2,400 kids in our high school. And I had over 700 in my graduating class, and I didn't know 3/4 of them.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges is our tax base. We need more business, and we need more manufacturing or light industry, and that has been a challenge, and that's something that the town administrator would be involved with, I would hope.
Okay.
So that's the biggest challenge.
Right. Yeah. And your selectmen all raised that same issue of the economic development, and it was also a topic that came up quite a bit with the department heads. Same thing, particularly looking at the center area. Now, you won't necessarily put light industry in the center, perhaps, but it is an opportunity for development from the standpoint of tax revenue, but also from a sense of community perspective, that having that vital center. So that was something that, again, came up. And I know that in our profile, we are referencing a report that was done by the Old Colony Planning Commission about the opportunities here in the center area. And we're familiar with some of the other developments that have happened in some of your facilities here. There was an old Shaw's development that's now been converted to 47 brand that has some. Right. So it's jobs, but it's not necessarily the types of jobs that you're thinking of, but.
Right,
Right,
yeah.
okay. But again, I sort of, to use the two of you sitting right next to each other there, the economic development, but retaining the character is
Exactly.
something that's important. If I could sort of tie those together. Someone else?
How thorough is your vetting process for the candidates?
We think very thorough. And we look at it from a couple of different ways. One, as John has mentioned, with his history of 40 years in the business here in Massachusetts, and mine is comparable. We know almost all of the people that will be applying. We know the backstories to their careers. We can we can separate the wheat and the chaff in terms of their skills and their backgrounds. Beyond that, we do reference checks in terms of contacting people that they have worked with to get an analysis of their strengths and weaknesses. And we also use our network to reach out, if we don't happen to know everything about them, reach out to people around them to identify issues that might be taking place with them. And then we do a criminal history check, and we verify their employment and their education.
Are you checking what the word on the street is, not just favorable references?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Very good.
absolutely.
I think that's where we come in, knowing a lot of folks in the business. We make the phone calls around the corner and say, hey, what do you know about this person? So we know folks from a lot of communities, to do that, so.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
At what point in the process is you get 30 applications?
Mhm.
Obviously, you don't run a criminal check, background
No.
check on all
No.
30, but at what number do you start doing those things? Or do you wait till you say, okay, this is the one?
The way the process would work is, hypothetically, we receive 30 applications. We would sit down with the screening committee and go through all 30 applications. We would identify for them, basically the way we've always done it is we break them into 3 categories. The qualified, the not qualified, and the people that are interesting. That they may not be the traditional town administrator type of background, but perhaps they have some other background that would be useful. Then we narrow that 30 down to probably 7, 8, 9 people that would be interviewed. During that first process, we do, if we are aware of a particular situation or issues with a candidate that might look good on paper, but we know some other information about them, we alert the screening committee so that they don't use their time to interview someone who wouldn't work out. But we narrow it down to that 7, 8, or 9. They conduct the interviews with our assistants. They identify the 3 finalists, maybe 4. We like 3. It's a reasonable number, and it gives the candidates, the finalist candidates, a comfort level that their odds are pretty good, 1 in 3, as opposed to 1 in 4. Those are the people that we do the more in-depth reference checks, criminal history, and so on. And then we always recommend to the Board of Selectmen that when they make their appointment, they make it conditioned upon successful negotiation of a contract and any further background checks. So if there are any questions that arise before or during that process that were somehow missed along the way, or that comes out, that we can go off and do additional background work.
Going back just quickly to your comment that you will likely know almost all the applicants, so does that mean they're all coming from Massachusetts? Or you anticipate them coming from Mass?
We anticipate them coming from Massachusetts for a variety of reasons. People tend to stay in the states. We will advertise nationally. We advertise in the Massachusetts Municipal Association and the International City and County Management Association, which reaches across the country. Because there may be some candidates out there in another part of the country who are interested in moving to this area, or perhaps are from this area originally and would otherwise miss the position if it weren't advertised in that way. For the most part, though, candidates tend to stay in their own states, and sometimes and oftentimes it's the pension systems that they're operating with that dictate where they will go. We had a candidate recently that was part of the New York pension system and chose to stay in New York. Others don't come to Massachusetts specifically because of the pension system, because of the way you pay into that pension system, that is not always advantageous to candidates. You pay a large amount of your salary to the pension system, and therefore they opt not to. But we tend to know most of the candidates. We may have said all. We pretty much know all of the managers, but we don't,
Always know the kid.
there's always a few that pop up that we don't necessarily know.
I'd say probably less than 5% of the managers over the last 30 years have come from out of state. But there's been many who have changed professions, within this area. So we've seen, various candidates come in recent years being from state reps and mayors, from the political side, coming to the administrative side, as well as military, and business as well. So we've seen, some of that. But it's difficult to move into the state, from an economic viewpoint. So, it tends to really be local candidates for the most part, within the region to occur. Because making a move, even if you're from one part of Massachusetts trying to move to another, is a little bit difficult. So we tend to find more candidates who are within a travel distance by vehicle within an hour.
Right. But, having said that, I don't want to, in case we end up with the best candidate being someone from out of state, it can work. We've had some very successful candidates here.
Exactly.
That have come from New Jersey, Maryland, come immediately to mind, that have been very successful.
So this afternoon, I spent some time on another search we're doing, just reviewing some candidates from out of state and just doing some background checks through starting because they're initial candidates. So.
Yes.
I do have a question about, my concern would be the administrative style of a candidate.
Good point.
When you say the manager appointed this, I wouldn't even consider thinking about something like that the administrator would be a team leader and not a team dictator.
Right.
Just that it's easier to be a team dictator because you get things done. A team manager, bringing people together and bringing the best people and allowing the best people to rise. So that would be my main concern, the style, the administrative style.
Okay. And you want, your recommendation is that style be more collaborative and inspirational, perhaps?
Well, I don't know about inspirational.
Well, maybe that moves from management to leadership, but it's
Leadership,
right.
camaraderie,
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
but,
I don't know.
inspirational.
as opposed to someone who helps set a vision for the team, as opposed to telling them what
What the vision is.
what they have to do.
I want to give a quick +1 to that. I think we've made great strides in the past year or two in having all of the folks leading the town work well together and really try to be inclusive of creating that vision of working together across the town and creating more transparency. So I think in order to keep that going, we need someone that fits well with that style and is excited to work with the Board of Selectmen and excited to work with all of the department heads in the departments, and that they really want to craft some of those pieces together.
Right. Good. Excellent.
I'd like to see somebody who actually not only works in the town, but we can't mandate them to live or anything, but to be active in the town. Be on, come to the concert on the Common.
Right.
Be out and about within the town, not just come to work at town hall, go back home, come to work at town hall.
Right. Yeah.
Right, they would have to be a threat in the community. I agree with Steve 100%. to have somebody show up at a ball game, to show up at a concert, to become a part of the community is very, very important. That's how you get to know everybody in the community, not just the folks here in this building here.
Right.
When this job was created years ago, and the job description was done for this job, the intent was to encompass a lot of what these folks are talking about right now.
Mhm.
It was somebody to run the day-to-day operation at the direction of the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Not give direction to the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
To work with department heads, to collaborate, to come up with things and work together. We were kind of lacking that a bit. And the one way to do that is to become a part of the community. And I think it's very important. That's how you get to know the community, by being out there with the community. This person has got to be able to put aside their feelings and differences. Because you may not agree with something, but it's for the better of the greater good of the community.
Right.
So oftentimes, people will look at, well, we want this or we want that, and it's very isolated, but not considering how it impacts this or how it impacts that. Or we have to make the right decision for everybody here. And let's face it, sometimes some people are gonna win, some people are gonna lose. You know, we went through we went through a period of a lot of growth. When I moved here 28 years ago, okay?
It's a very popular time to move to the town.
I'm a newcomer, I'm only here 26.
There were 7,000 people here. There's 14,000 people here now.
Right.
Theory.
I mean, we
Go
built
for
out,
this.
and
They're
one of
only
our
8 years.
economic plans was to put over 55 communities everywhere, because they won't impact the school system.
Right.
So we got 55 communities all over the place. We haven't done anything with any other land. We're landlocked. We attempted town sewerage to hopefully resolve situations, but we've got to consider at the same time, even though we're landlocked and we have that, we have access issues too. If we have a company, I might go off to West Bridgewater at the industrial park right off of Route 24 than having to drive over there. So we got a lot of issues. So somebody who is familiar with the challenges of basically really a rural community that's landlocked would be very, very, very important. And on another note, when we interviewed last time for the last candidates, we did have some out-of-state folks. We had a gentleman actually from New Hampshire who was a pretty good candidate too. And I personally, maybe piggyback on what Steve said here a little bit, is somebody who's gonna drive 2 hours to get here and then leave for 2 hours home is not gonna be ingrained in this community.
Right.
I mean, it's a grueling commute from whichever direction you come.
Right.
So somebody who's willing to be involved, and I think if you're talking, regionally, if you're somewhere in the area, that's one thing, but if you're in Western Mass and you think you're gonna drive here and become a part of the community, it's gonna be a very, very difficult challenge for them. Very difficult. And I would also like to make sure that we have somebody who does more than stay in this building. And I'm not talking about just going to a ball game. But somebody who's gonna get involved with our legislatures on Beacon Hill. That if there's a contingent of folks in this community going to Beacon Hill to have a talk about certain, Chapter 70 money, school funding, whatever, that they're there to support that group, to be involved with the state legislatures. East Bridgewater's in a unique situation. It's broken up. We have precincts that are with one senator, precincts with another representative, the way they broke it up.
Right.
4 legislators for this community.
Yeah.
Okay? Oftentimes you go out and you campaign and you talk to folks, oh, I'm not in that precinct, I'm not in that precinct, you know? So to have somebody who can pull all that together, somebody who is not afraid to go out and pursue opportunities on Beacon Hill, go in there and talk to people. Because the only time conversation seems to take place is when those folks come here once a month or once every 2 months to give an update. And usually it's around election time.
Right.
So.
Well, a couple of things that I just want to sort of respond to a little bit. One is that this is a typical question that I ask at these forums, or when I'm meeting with, and the selectmen will verify that I do this. There's 2 different visions of a town administrator. One is the one with the green eye shade that sits in a room with spreadsheets and does that, and the other is someone who's out and about and engaging the community. And of course, we need a little bit of both. But oftentimes when we ask that question, we get a sense of which way. And there is a move I will say this, it has been a move in the profession. More communities, more towns, cities and towns are looking for the person who's going to be out and about and engaging with the community, as long as the nuts and bolts work still gets done. The other observation I would make is that, and I guess I would ask this, are you looking for the town administrator to be more of a player, if you will, or East Bridgewater to be more, with him or her representing East Bridgewater, to have East Bridgewater be more of a player regionally, working with other towns and in the area?
I personally would like to see them working more with other towns. Years ago, we did a study with Dr. DeSantis from Bridgewater State. At that time, because of the economic times, there was a lot of conversation about looking at things regionally with Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, et cetera, things like that. When we had sewage study or wastewater studies, it was talking about how can we work with Bridgewater. We met with folks in Brockton. And all the other communities had an interest of working together. We didn't have an interest in working with them. So I think we let go of a lot of opportunities. But somebody who is, I mean, you know, if you can't talk to your neighbor next door, you're not gonna go to Beacon Hill and talk to anybody up there either. So I think we need a combination of both. We need somebody who's gonna be very active, supporting the community and doing community outreach.
Someone who's open to best practices,
Yeah,
learning
best
best practices, looking around, seeing, you know, what works in other communities.
What other communities do. Sir?
I think we just added like $40,000 to the person's asking price, but not that that's a problem. But this actually all goes toward one of the questions I had sort of initially. You were talking about needing to find somebody who fits in.
Right.
And I think fitting in is, it's all of these things that are talked about, but I think that has been part of the problem with the past administrator too, was somebody who fit in with certain portions of the community and not other portions of the community. And I think there needs to be some type of a healthy tension between fitting in and really being part of, let's just say, an old boy network, and being able to work with people where they're coming from, say no to people who aren't used to saying no, and not understand the culture, but also work to improve and change the culture. You can't just fit in and let things run the way that they've been running. You also can't come in and say you're doing it wrong. We need to do it this way. I've seen people come into situations both ways, and neither one works. So defining what that fitting in, I think, is really important.
That balance, and oftentimes it is, and this is something hopefully that the screening committee and then the Board of Selectmen can accomplish, is finding that balance and that personality that knows how to be the change agent without being the disruptor.
Right. And so I think we do need someone who's transformative, to use an overused word, but I think that's what I'd be looking for.
Great. And successful at it.
Right, yeah.
You can be, again, you can
positive.
Right, you can be that disruptor.
Right.
And transformative, but if you don't have the skills to. Okay.
And pretty much we want it all.
Sure.
Both ends of the spectrum.
I've yet to find a town that doesn't, so.
Back to the nuts and bolts again. I sort of asked this question at the beginning. So who's actually drafting the proposal or the call, and then is the final thing really just the contract? Is that simply a legal document that's drafted by the town's lawyer, or what's sort of the relationship?
Well, the profile is being drafted. That's why I don't have any paper in front of me. It's not that I'm not taking everything down. Sharon is developing the profile. Sharon's background is in communications and marketing, and so she'll be assembling this document in a way that will take all of your information, all the other information we have, and make it. And we have one here from the town of Dedham.
I have a sample here,
but if you go online, you can see what one looks like. And then the contract will be prepared by your town council.
No.
We assist as needed, and act as an intermediary if necessary, but it's a legal document that's prepared by attorneys.
the contract that this person would have to work. Now, wouldn't this person come in with a contract prepared by his or her lawyer, and then our town council would look at it and make changes? Because it seems quite often that the town council is preparing a contract, and it's very much in the favor of the one who's being hired. Shouldn't there be a nice balance between there, rather than having the town council come in and say, this is where it's going to be, all for the town, which would be great?
Right.
Or would there be more compromise?
We've seen it done both ways. Some communities say, give us a contract, let us look at it. Others, and let them spend the money on doing that. Although there is a model contract that's prepared by the Massachusetts Municipal Management Association that most of the managers and administrators use as a template. And that would go out, and then they would fill in the blanks of what they would be looking for, and then the board could respond to that. Or councils have prepared these on their own and utilize those. That's much further down the road, but that will depend upon where we are with the candidates at that particular time.
They truly are negotiable. So, you know, it goes, and it depends, you know, what the market's calling for, you know, of course. But basically, you know, for the most part, most of us have had contracts all these years. It gets signed and it gets put in the drawer, because you don't have to look at it, you know, till it's up. It's only when contention, you know, comes about that, you know, that it becomes important. But for the most part, it's a model contract out there. You know, people are looking, you know, the manager wants protection, you know, wants to be indemnified, you know, what's going to occur. And then the discussion is, what are the conditions of employment? You know, what's the pay, you know, and what are the benefits? And typically the benefits are very standard from what the other employees are, you know, receiving within the community. So it's not that complicated in the end, but it is that, you know, a give and take as to, for the most part, salaries number one, and then you work your way back from there.
It's just historically, subcontracts have been unusual. And
Okay.
when it gets contentious,
Right.
then that unusual characteristic pops out.
Right.
And
But there are norms. All I can say is there are norms, you know, in our industry of what occurs.
And it
So
would be-
we can look at, you know, I can go over each benefit and tell you what the norm is, you know, what's the range, you know, we see out there. But that's for the Board of Selectmen to work, so we don't dictate those terms, and we're not selecting the candidate here, you know, so our role is to try to provide insight so that your screening committee and the Board of Selectmen have the knowledge base to select their candidates. But we you know, we're not here to,
Right.
you know, to put forth.
So that would be town council and select people would be
Yeah.
responsible for making a contract that's
Correct.
comfortable for everyone.
Correct, and again, we can serve as a resource. One thing John just mentioned, though, that is, that I just wanted to talk about just for a moment as well, is the market. It's right now, it's a, just so everyone goes into this with sort of eyes wide open, it's a seller's market right now, generally speaking. It's a good economy, you know, in general. There's been a generational shift that's been happening in the municipal management world as the baby boomers all retire. In the last 3 years, Massachusetts has roughly 250 town administrator, town manager positions. In the last 3 years, about 110 of those have turned over.
Wow.
Over a third.
Yeah.
So, you know, so there aren't necessarily, a few years back, when a job opened up, you'd see a large number of people applying for those. That's no longer
The case.
necessarily the case. And what's happened too is that there are a number of good young people coming into the business now. Not quite enough probably to replace the baby boomers that are leaving. And then there's the sort of the generation in between that didn't go into municipal government. They opted, if you look back sort of historically or economically, those people that came of age at a time when the jobs that they pursued were more private sector jobs. So it does make for an interesting tension to see who's out there looking. But I'm confident that we will be able to get you some good candidates. We've had great success. We've done now town manager, town administrator searches. We've done about 32 of them now over the last 3 years. Our firm, and which is more than any other firm that's done those in that period of time. And we have good candidates that have been selected in every one of those communities, I would say.
Do you know how many communities are in the market for a new town administrator at this
Right
point
now?
in time, right now?
Do you happen to know that? I would say, I would guess probably, I can rattle off in my head.
Right.
Probably about half a dozen. We're doing, we just wrapped up several right around us: Rockland, Marion, Lakeville. We just did Palmer.
Two just opened up in the
Brewster.
last week.
Yeah.
So this is something that's, it's more than what we saw
Right.
10 years ago as far as
Yeah.
opening quickly.
I mean, I thought it was going to slow, after we just wrapped up, we had 12
Yeah.
going at once a couple months ago. And then there were the ones that were being done differently. But as John said, just in the last 2 weeks, a week.
One last week, one this week,
Right.
and maybe one or two more that I'm hearing. But
Right.
so a lot of retirements in the last. I mean, we've both retired. I just retired a couple months ago. Bernie retired 4 years ago.
4 years ago, 5 years ago.
I can tell you, I went to a meetings. We were 8 communities in this regional group on housing. So we were 8 managers sitting there. 7 of us were retiring within that year. 7 of the 8. So only 1 was staying, and she was fairly new, and she replaced a retiree a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So these 8, managers who I've known for 30 years, we were all in this regional group, and we took a group picture. This was last April. We took a group picture together because now there's, Chris is the last one, I think, and those 8, 7 of the 8 retired in this last year. So that's just an example, of what's occurred. So.
But there's, again, that's just to give you a picture of what's out there. But there are some exceptional, we were just very successful over in Rockland, hiring a new the assistant manager from Sandwich made the decision to move there. Another the school facilities manager from Sandwich just took the job in Marion. So
there are some, we've been impressed. So we're both involved in training programs in different ways with younger folks. And we've seen in the last 5 years more new folks coming into the business, and they're starting as analysts and departments, assistant directors and stuff in various areas. And we're seeing that come through, as Bernie said, I think in the 90s. We really didn't see too much new blood, into local government. So we are, on the other hand, seeing that new blood. So, the idea is to capture, one of those folks, and who will come in, and they've had some seasoning, but they've got a lot of enthusiasm, and they've got, some of these, when you look at some of the larger communities, I can think of Andover, Danvers, and Arlington have all had managers under 30 years old in the last couple of years.
Wow.
So we've seen that trend, with some younger folks coming in and actually doing very well, in these opportunities.
And then there's the others that are serving as assistants and have backgrounds in legal backgrounds or that have proven very successful. You just have to know where to find them.
to what Mr. Kramer said earlier, there is a job description. Do you guys have that job description?
I believe we do have a copy of that we've,
The bylaws.
and we have the bylaws that we utilize.
So would you, before the community committee gets together, would you review that job description?
We've actually talked
Present it?
to the board about doing that ahead of time. We can move forward with the advertising
Yeah.
ahead of that, but yes, we have a number of sample ones that we can use.
And then in there, one of the things that came up was that this person would be the chief procurement officer for the
Mhm.
town. And that's, I would think it's kind of normal.
It is normal.
It is.
It's actually in chapter 30B.
So when we talk about what we're looking for in this person, I would also suggest that they have procurement experience and that they do take that lead in the community.
Right. Yeah.
Because we have had some struggle around various things we've procured over the past few years.
Okay. Yeah, we did catch some information on
Okay.
that. But yes, and if they, certainly it is a nice preference if they are certified procurement officers, but there is regular training through the Inspector General's office, you can receive that.
Do the applicants generally have master's degrees in either business or, municipal administration or?
Sure, most, generally, I would say the majority have a master's degree in public administration.
Yeah.
But I mentioned before that another group that I'm seeing a lot of are attorneys that are going into municipal government as well. But public administration, law, planning are probably the top three that we're seeing.
Some places finance, coming in with that finance background because they've been accountants and so on, so I've seen that in a couple of locations recently. My successor where I left was the town accountant.
Yep.
And he went and got his master's, but he was trained, he was a CPA.
Right.
And then,
Well, that's very good to have. Yeah.
Why do you say that?
What, because I'm an accountant?
I'm just saying, I don't know.
Other things. What are the top, we've heard economic development, we've heard retaining the character. What are the other big issues? We've heard about community engagement, transparency, building a team.
Maybe breaking down silos and getting everybody rowing in the same direction.
Okay. Common in almost any organization, particularly municipal government, to have silos. So breaking those down.
What does
Farming
that
silos.
mean? We don't have that many farms left. Breaking down silos? No, I'm serious. What does that mean?
Organizationally, oftentimes, I'll give you sort of an example to illustrate it, perhaps. You'll have one department not necessarily hoarding their resources
Okay.
because it's their resources,
Resources, yeah.
as opposed to another one. So if another department needs a little help, we'll let them go off on their own. We have our, in the end, it's all East Bridgewater money.
Right.
It's all East Bridgewater staff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of breaking down silos are where ways that the departments might be able to cooperate, share staff, share resources, share expertise, so that you're not, that you're all rowing in the same direction.
Right.
And silo's another term for turf. So, Bernie was talking about departments, I'll talk about boards. And, boards might sometimes, I've seen many times, this is my turf, you do what you're supposed to do, I'll do it, versus trying to get together and try to find the best route for the community.
Got it.
And they stick to the fact that, we're supposed to be doing this. Bring in the idea. So silo can be another word for turf, and working in that area.
Thank you.
Good question.
I mean, another thing that they need to do is they need to make it a comfortable environment. What I mean by that is, there was a point where every board and committee in this town was filled. and it wasn't too long ago. And now there's plenty of vacancies. People, I don't know if they're afraid to get involved or if they want to get involved and they're afraid of getting shot down and or criticized, et cetera. I think the boards need to be made up of what's a reflection of the community. You can't just have, I'll just say the finance committee, for example, you can't just have just finance people. There are other taxpayers, there are there are mothers, there are fathers, there are, you know, just bringing the community together.
Sure.
And having the encouragement for people to participate.
Okay.
Other than just on Facebook.
So what are some of the great things about East, you know, I'm not familiar with East Bridgewater, so, and I get the concept of it being, you know, landlocked, you know, in the middle of the area. I worked in a town, you know, very similar to that, you know, prior to in Ashland, and we, you know, we had Framingham over there, and, you know, Marlboro on the other side, and it's like we were off of Route 9, off of 495, but didn't have those connections. So we had to work out that. But what about, you know, I come through the center, and I love, I gotta tell you, you know, I just love pulling into this building here. You know, it really gives me a sense of community. You know, when we left the, you know, after meeting with the Selectmen, you know, heard the church playing God Bless America there, and, you know, it was like just a great piece, but just driving the center. So what about East Bridgewater makes you excited?
We'll drive through the center when school gets out.
That gets you excited?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Well, that's every town, you know, that's every town, but, you know, so I heard a little bit about the community and the fact, you know, you talked earlier about the library and the activities, and I heard the history and, you know, these other things. You know, talk a little bit more about, you know, what gets you excited to be members of East Bridgewater?
Well, when we first moved here, this whole Christmas on the Common.
Yep.
And there were little houses and things up here, and the choir played, and we had the Christmas parade out here. And I'll never forget, there was this one long Christmas parade, and I'm out here, and I was here for maybe 2 years, 3 years. And they were walking with horses down there and llamas, and I'm like, where the heck am I?
Where did you come from
I
originally?
came from the city on the North Shore. I grew up in Lawrence, Methuen.
Oh, okay.
And we're there, and everybody, this is wonderful, and I'm like, are you kidding me? But I loved it, and I look forward every year. And it was someplace that we were able to go as a family,
Right.
where my kids were able to grow up in a healthy environment, and it was like home.
Yep.
It wasn't like, okay, hey, go on the street, play on the corner, go,
Sure.
you know, play football in the parking lot, don't get hurt, and come in when the lights go on, right? Everybody was together, and when you went to the amount of people who participate in the soccer league, or the football league, or the baseball, everybody just pitches in and is together.
Yeah.
That, in many areas around Massachusetts, everywhere, that stuff is gone.
Mm-hmm.
We still have that,
Okay, cool.
Good.
so.
Ma'am?
I have two things. One I'm a little afraid to say is I've only lived here for 5 years. So I'm definitely a newbie in the room. I appreciate that I have the ability to live in a small town that does feel like a close-knit community. And then for me, I do commute into Boston every day for work. At our location, I take public transportation, so I don't have to deal with 24 or any of that. But we actually do have the ability to get in not too bad if we want to. So I appreciate having that balance of I can go into work every day, but I come home and I know my neighbors and my friends, and I just think that's really great, and folks have been incredibly welcoming. I joined a town commission after living here for less than 2 years, and have just been able to meet all kinds of great people. The other thing, which I think is a benefit, although sometimes very frustrating, we're incredibly politically active in town, all across the full spectrum. So I think that shows that we have a lot of folks that really care.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that in town elections and state elections and national. You know, there's folks that are out in the center of town, canvassing, sign holding, and they're really involved. And whether you agree with whatever their stance is or not, I appreciate the fact that folks actually care and are willing to take the time and voice their opinion and try to get support.
Great. They didn't have llamas in Lawrence?
No, we had pigeons.
Pigeons.
There was
wasn't the year that the horse dropped.
That was the year the
parade.
horse dropped dead on Route 18, yeah. And they had to
Oh,
get
that was
flatbed
that
and
year?
tore it
Oh,
up.
geez.
That parade was so long, it was 3 hours. I was standing right there. And I'm saying, why are these people standing here for so long? This is crazy. Find out the sheriff's horse died.
Wasn't anything else to do.
But then we went for a few years without this Christmas parade.
Yeah.
And then it came back again.
Right.
And every year it's getting a little bit better and better and better. So I think, you know, communication is an important piece. Enticing people to come out and participate is very, very important.
There's a concert on the Common there's several of them, but there's one usually at the last day of school.
We gotta find a new group for that, though. It's gonna be okay, I don't know.
Those numbers have been going down for the last few years.
I mean, we're lucky we can sell a hamburger right now.
But it is, again, kind of the parade being the thing leading up to Christmas, the Common concert.
Concerts on the Common,
usually
yeah.
Tied in with the last day of school, or pretty close to the last day of school.
Okay.
You find everybody out there and all the kids running around the monument.
And then in the fall, they have a business, the East Bridgewater Business Association has an exposition on the Common as well, but they have activities for the kids, so they have, and then there's a booth for those people who are small businesses in town. So that's another way that they reach out. A lot of fun events.
Yeah.
And then we have something called the Civil War Roundtable even.
What is that?
That is a historical discussion surrounded with the common theme of the Civil War. And about 30 people show up every month.
And it rained.
Wow.
Every.
I gotta get that one, I gotta show up.
Well, don't forget the chili chowder fest if you got a bike, right?
That's right.
Down there.
Pancake breakfast.
Sounds like.
Iguanas.
Because the horse had.
Or the commercial club. Oh yeah, they're really good to the seniors around here.
We haven't been inside the community center yet, but we hear wonderful things about it, and it is a beautiful building when we've come by. In fact, it's a picture that's in our profile already. So.
Great.
So one of the things for the screening committee and the selectmen is a candidate wants to know they can succeed. You know, nobody wants to jump into a job that, you know, they don't think they have an opportunity to succeed. So, you know, when interviewing, when discussing, you know, with these candidates, it's you know, showing the enthusiasm both ways. You know, the candidates hopefully going to come in and show their enthusiasm, but that candidate wants to see, you know, that enthusiasm the same way, because nobody wants to come in and fail. So the opportunity to succeed is huge, you know, in these interviews and being able to step up. And I know that's something I always looked at, you know, when I interviewed. You know, I don't know how long they let me stay in a job, what, 1 year usually?
Right.
But, you know, so anyways, you know, it was having to, you know, you want to be, you know, a part of something special, you know, and that I know is both ways, so.
Yes.
One more question.
Sure.
Sorry, way back to recruiting. I'm just thinking, do you try to pull from diverse pools of candidates? You know, in addition to the places you listed that you recruit, you know, how are you trying to get folks that might not readily show up from other towns, for example?
Well, I guess there are two questions in there. I sense two questions. One is a question of diversity, and the other is a question of how do we get people to apply. And getting people to apply is just knowing who's out there that.
But still mostly with the lens of diversity.
Okay, you want to.
No offense to the white male panel.
Yeah.
That's yeah. No. That's a very valid question. It's something that the profession has identified as an issue. We don't have enough women in the profession. That's changing. And there's actually an organization that's been established here in Massachusetts. It's a national with different state chapters, and we have one here in Massachusetts, Women Leading Government. And so we have that organization, and we don't have enough people of color. And that's more difficult barrier for us here in Massachusetts. Less so in other parts of the country, but it has been an issue here. But we do, in order to get candidates, the issue is how do we, we'd have to, particularly people of color, is how do we get people that would move here? Because there's several here in the Commonwealth, but it might be a more difficult match. As far as women go, though, going back to women, I'm actually very proud of the fact that of all of the searches we've done, I think we've had a woman in the finals 2/3 of the time.
Oh, that's good.
And we've had a woman selected in, I think, 1/3 of the communities that we've served. And we'd like to see those numbers continue to advance.
It is a national issue as well.
Absolutely.
When you look at the percentage of women who are legislators, across, you've seen those numbers, and it's like 15%, in places. And so it is something that, we're trying to work on it. We do have the connections, with, the various groups. And so one of the things we try to do is be supportive of people who are selected, once they're in here. So, even though we're not working for the town of East Bridgewater the day after, we will know these people, who are selected. And I'm a co-founder of the Managers Boot Camp. Bernie is part of the Suffolk program, working with young people, so we stay active. So they can always have, our number, and because we're managers first, recruiters second, we try to work with everybody so that they can be successful. So that's one of the things, when we talk to the selectmen, that's one of the things I think we highlighted, coming in, that we don't just walk away. If they were to, call Bernie or I, the week after, the month after, we're taking that phone call, and we're gonna take as much time as possible, because it's our profession, as well, so.
And we try to certainly connect them to the network of that's out there of municipal managers throughout. There's a great South Shore group, and there's a state organization, and we encourage them to be involved in both of those, as well as the International City and County Managers Association.
As you get to know East Bridgewater better, as you're starting to put out the ads, you obviously know who's out there. Do you start making calls and say, hey, we know of a job for you? You might not be thinking, they may not have sent in the resume, but you
Yes.
do that?
Yeah, that's, again, that's, I think that's one of the value adds that we bring, is that, again, we know the people, and we know who's out there that might be a good fit, or might be out looking. And then beyond that, we serve as a resource. Perhaps we don't reach out to the people for whatever reason, but they know us, and they can contact us and ask the questions about East Bridgewater that they wouldn't necessarily want to call East Bridgewater and ask about. So that we can then present the information that we heard tonight. We can talk about the real sense of community here, the small town charm of East Bridgewater, the fact that it's a welcoming community that wants to move forward. We can talk about all those things and allay any concerns that they have about.
So a couple of tools, I've got my maps here of all different regions, and we'll sit there and we'll actually go town by town and say who's available, in that area, and got the list of all the managers in the state now, so we utilize these, as part of what we do, and so we'll go through this. And this is, basically my sticky, after talking with, Bernie, of, potential candidates, of folks out there, and we go over. And so I got to talk to him after this about a candidate that didn't know about an opportunity, and was a cold call, and so that's what we do, is make these cold calls to people.
You're aware of the assistant TAs?
Yes,
in
that's
town?
on the same.
They're all
that's in
part
same
of the
list.
same organization.
Yeah.
And as John said, the other, he co-founded the boot camp for people that are interested in becoming managers, and they go to once a year, there's a one-day session that brings them in, and managers talk about what they do. I'm involved with the Suffolk and MMA Local Government Certificate Program, where we have, we've now graduated, I think, coming up on 300 people that have gone through the program, students have gone through the program. I just completed one in Foxborough last week. It's a 9-month program. It gives you credits towards a master's degree in public administration. And a number of those graduates have now gone on to become managers and administrators. Perhaps they were department heads, perhaps they were assistant managers, but that's that network. And then it's the network of people that have applied for positions here with us. You know, if you look at the 30-some odd searches we've done, there's some duplicates that apply to numerous positions, but if you figure that there are 30 to 40 that apply for every position that we recruit for, that's a substantial number of people that we now have in our database that we can draw upon.
Just a quick shout out on the Suffolk program. Rocco Longo, you know, your intern was actually the person who started that in its own concept in the South Shore, working with Suffolk, and then it got taken over by the MMA.
Right.
And then, so he was, you know, one of the key people, you know, on that one. So since he's here, I just wanted to, you know, plus some credit out, you know, where it was due with Rocco about, what, 12 years ago, maybe? I don't know, something like that.
Don't say anything to him, though. It'll go to his head.
They'll put this on a loop.
That's right. Make it very difficult for us.
Since this is public facing or for the candidates, I just want to sort of follow up on that. I think it would be great if we were able to get a female administrator in here. I think a lot of the departments that have gotten short shrift and the people in town who have gotten short shrift have been traditionally female-oriented departments, such as the library and schools and in those areas. So I think that would be a great idea. I think if we wanted a person of color in the position, we'd probably have to offer them their own reality show to move here. So.
Okay.
Okay. Any other follow-up comments?
I actually have one other quick question. I want to kind of go back, way back, sorry. If, in talking about the difference between a town administrator and a town manager,
Right.
if we were to, say, make some kind of movement over the next few years, whether it be through changes in bylaws, charter, that type of thing, would that theoretically affect the candidates that we'd be looking at now?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I would say it would probably take you, it takes 2 or 3 years to have that move forward. So I would look for the best possible candidate you have now for what you have. What it could do is, where I thought you might be going with that question is, sometimes it's being talked about or already underway in a community, and that could impact the candidate pool. But so we work with the candidates to have them understand the issues that are being talked about. For instance, in Amherst, when we did the search out there 4 years ago, they were in the midst of discussing whether they were going to keep a town manager, whether they were going to go to a mayor. And we were able to reassure the candidates, and they had a number of very good candidates, and in fact, they made the decision based upon the candidates that they had, or the selection that they made, to stay with a manager, but change the legislative body. Amherst is a substantially larger community, though. They could head in that direction. But I think that you know, you'd probably want to look at if you are thinking of doing something like that in the future, you know, you'd want to have the candidates be able to make the transition with you. And that, you know, I mentioned my own experience. I was the executive secretary. The Board of Selectmen had given me authority, but it was, you know, if the board had changed, that might have changed. But when they made the move to a town manager, it was a seamless transition for me because I had already been granted that authority by the board. So you need to have that comfort level, though, as you go through that.
So I can think of many communities that kept the same person, you know, when the transfer was made. And I can think of a couple that did not. So I think it depends on, who the person is and whether they're, capable, what was their role, his or her role when it was, I would say, the executive secretary, town administrator type, and was that person capable of, stepping into the next piece? So I think it depends on the person going in. And also, how much latitude was that person given by the board, prior to entering that? So, so I can name off communities as I'm thinking as, when you were asking a question. I can name communities both ways, of what occurred, and some very successful folks, who are town managers today, Kate Fitzpatrick, a bunch of others, went through that and were successful in doing it.
But there's such a crossover right now between administrator and manager.
It's really-
that was our point earlier.
Unless we're going to mayor, and we're not going to mayor.
Right.
That was our point earlier of,
Yeah.
30 years ago, we'd be having a totally different discussion here of what the positions are. Now, as I said, I was a town manager and then became a town administrator. So I moved from a town manager, format, but I went to a town administrator. But I went to Burlington too, where my budget was 3 times the size of where I was as a town manager. So, I actually had more responsibility, with my second budget than I did with my first because of everything that was happening. But I had less control under the charter. I had no charter actually in Burlington, but it didn't mean, that it was any less a position. In my opinion, I had more responsibility, to get things done in that.
But I think the short answer to that is you pick the best candidate because you don't know how that's all going to unfold too. Anything else? All right. Well, I do want to thank Mike, Dave, and Carol for giving us the opportunity to be here tonight and speak with all of you. Look forward to bringing you some great candidates and interacting with you again as we go through the process. Great. Great. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.